Carlos was at his lowest point, and he knew it. At 45 years old, he felt like a shadow of the man he used to be. Just a few years ago, he had everything: a steady career, a comfortable home, and a family who loved him. But life had other plans, and it felt like everything conspired to pull him down. The divorce came first, an agonizing separation that left him feeling empty. His ex-wife, Camila, had been his partner for over a decade, and losing her was like losing a part of himself. Then came the job loss. He'd been a logistics manager, a dependable professional, but the depression that followed his divorce eroded his ability to perform. His bosses, once supportive, started to see him as a liability. One day, he walked out of the office with a termination letter in hand. Carlos tried to rebuild. He sent out resumes, went to interviews, but the job market wasn't kind to someone his age with a dwindling spark. His savings dried up, and he was forced to sell the house where he and Camila had built so many memories. He moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in an old building with paper-thin walls and a creaky staircase. That night, like so many others, Carlos went out for a walk. He didn't have a destination. He just needed to escape the oppressive silence of his apartment. The streets were nearly empty, save for a few hurried passers-by who didn't pay him any attention. He felt invisible, like the world had moved on without him. Then he heard it. A faint whimper, almost like a cry, coming from a narrow alley. At first, he thought he was imagining things, but the sound came again, more desperate this time. He hesitated, staring into the darkness of the alley. "Not my problem," he muttered, but something inside him wouldn't let him walk away. When he stepped into the alley, the sight stopped him in his tracks. Curled up in the corner, beneath a pile of old cardboard boxes, was a thin, scruffy dog. Its fur, once white, was now streaked with dirt, and its ribs jutted out under its fragile frame. One of its legs was bent at an odd angle, as if it were injured. Carlos felt a pang of sympathy that he hadn't experienced in years. "Hey there," he whispered, kneeling down slowly. The dog flinched but didn't growl. It seemed too weak to resist. Carlos extended his hand cautiously, letting the dog sniff him. After a moment, the animal relaxed slightly, tilting its head just enough to show trust. Looking around, Carlos saw no sign of an owner. No collar, no leash, nothing to indicate that anyone cared about this dog. He knew it wasn't smart to take in a stray, but how could he leave it there? Gently, he scooped the dog into his arms. It was lighter than he expected, more bones than flesh. When he got home, he laid the dog on an old towel and placed a bowl of water nearby. "It's not much," he said. The dog drank eagerly, then curled up and closed its eyes as if it finally felt safe. The next morning, Carlos took the dog to a low-cost vet clinic in the neighborhood. The vet's diagnosis was grim: severe malnutrition, an infected leg, and signs of past abuse. "It's going to take a lot of care," the vet said, "but he can recover if you're willing to help." Carlos didn't know why, but he decided to take on the challenge. He named the dog Max, a simple name for a creature that had already endured so much. In the following weeks, Carlos learned how to care for Max, from administering medication to feeding him special food. As Max began to heal, so did Carlos. The dog's presence brought a kind of structure to his life that he hadn't had in years. Max's wagging tail and grateful eyes gave Carlos a sense of purpose. They started taking daily walks, and those walks became a lifeline for Carlos. For the first time in years, he felt like he was part of the world again. Max had a way of sensing Carlos's emotions. On particularly hard days, when the weight of the past felt unbearable, Max would rest his head on Carlos's lap, as if to remind him that he wasn't alone. Months passed, and Carlos began to rebuild his life. He found a temporary job that paid the bills, and for the first time in years, he started making plans for the future. He even began to reconnect with old friends. But the true impact of Max came one morning when Carlos woke up feeling strange. A dull ache spread across his chest, something he dismissed as anxiety. But the pain grew sharper, radiating to his left arm. He tried to get up, but his legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the floor. Max sensed the danger immediately. He began barking frantically, running to the door and scratching at it with all his might. The neighbors, alarmed by the noise, rushed to check on Carlos. When they opened the door, they found him unconscious on the floor. They called an ambulance, and paramedics arrived just in time. At the hospital, the doctors told Carlos he'd had a heart attack. "You're lucky you got here when you did," one of them said. "A few more minutes, and we might not have been able to save you." Carlos knew who he had to thank. Max, the dog he had saved him in return. Today, Carlos and Max are inseparable. Their bond is unbreakable, and Carlos often wonders who rescued who. Max gave him a reason to live, and in the end, he gave Carlos his life back. Want to know more about this story and many others we still have to share? Then don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every day, a new story comes straight from our mysterious archive, filled with tales and accounts we've gathered from various sources. Cases with stories that will give you chills. Also, don't forget to share this video with that friend of yours who loves a good mystery.